Hello guys, so today we're going to be doing a 1UZ VVT-i from a 98 to 2000 LS400. This one is for using an automatic gearbox and it is an adapted existing harness. So let's get into it. So as discussed, this is going to be a 1998 to 2000 LS400 that makes it a 1UZ VVT-i. This one is retaining the automatic gearbox, so we've got all the automatic gearbox wiring there. And in this case, it's an existing harness that we've stripped, cleaned and adapted to work as a standalone unit. So we've added fuse box and sorted all the plugs and everything out over there, as well as removing the immobiliser from the ECU itself. Okay, so as per normal, we're going to go through a whole bunch of things today. First thing we're going to do is go through the entire layout of the harness so the customer knows exactly where everything goes. We'll go through what we've removed, what's been retained, and then we're going to move on and go through the plugs over here and explain to you exactly how those all connect. Don't worry, this paperwork will be given with the harness, so you'll have all the information that we're going to go through here in, well, not paper form, we email it over to you, okay? Right, so onto the layout, and what we normally do is we're going to start here at the ECU end. So looking at the physical ECU itself, the engine harness, unlike the manual, these three plugs do remain as part of the engine harness itself. So if you want to remove the engine harness, you just need to unplug those three over there. These three, the 28, 22 and 26 pin plug, they are then added into this sectional harness over here. Now, because we didn't have enough wires in there, we've added a little DTM plug on here to accommodate 3 wires that we couldn't fit into the plugs in the existing setup that we had, okay? But basically that's it. So you have this section and it runs off to the big plug over there. Also runs off to the little 6-pin plug over there as well, and that takes care of this. So you can remove this whole section by unplugging the DTM and that plug over there. All right. Coming out of the harness itself, there is the plug that supplies everything that's required to the harness. Okay, so again, if you want to remove the engine harness, it's just those 3 plugs over there, that plug over there, the DTM plug, and you can pull the whole harness through and get it out of your way. Okay, right. Moving on from there, it's going to come up along there and you're going to end up with the rubber grommet. Okay, so we just leave this rubber grommet behind so you can cut a nice hole in your firewall and pop that through. Okay, completely seals everything up for you. Moving along there, then we come all the way to the back over here, and then we start at our little plastic section at the back that houses all the wiring. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go this way first, all right? Then we are going to go all the way to the front down to there, come back, and then we're going to carry on going that way over there. All right, so regarding the black piece of plastic over here, you'll see that there's 3 mounting points. One of them is over there, one of them is over there, and the third one is over there. Now, this is an LS400 engine originally, so the water bridge and everything is slightly different from a 1UZ, okay? And therefore, basically these 2 mounting points here and here don't have allocation on a 3UZ. So bear that in mind if you're putting a 1UZ harness onto a 3UZ engine. That's what you have to look forward to, and also vice versa. If you're putting a 3UZ engine harness onto a 1UZ, those mounting points at the back are not going to line up. Other than that, everything else is exactly the same. All right, so moving along here, obviously the harness comes up through there. We then get to our second piece of plastic that holds everything together. That has 2 mounting points, which is just that one over there. You can see the bolt there, and you can see the bolt over there. So again, super straightforward. Just bolt that down and you're ready to go. First little breakout that pops out over here is going to be injector 7 and coil 7. Okay, so remember, with the engine you're looking from behind, this is the left bank, that's the odd numbers, that's 1, 3, 5 and 7. Right bank is the even one, so it's 2, 4, 6 and 8. Okay, right, so moving along the plastic here, you're going to get to this section, and out of here you're going to have injector 5 and coil 5 popping out over there. You're going to move a little bit forward. You're going to get the next breakout over there. There's going to be 3 coming out here. You're going to have injector 3, coil 3. You're also going to have the cam sensor for the left bank over there. Right, once we're at the end of the plastic, you're going to have a little pop out section here, and the first thing that's going to pop out is your little noise filter that goes in over there. So this should, something similar to this should be already bolted onto there. The first things we removed is there's a little vacuum solenoid valve that lives on the inlet manifold here. That can be fully removed. That connector is now completely gone. Right, and the harness is going to carry on forward, and it's going to break out over here towards the front of the fuel rail. It's going to break out to injector 1, coil 1, and oil control valve. All right. Then the harness is going to go a little bit more forward and break out down here, and then it's going to go to the TPS plug. I know it doesn't look like a TPS plug, but there's your TPS, and you can see that Toyota have made a little sub harness because reaching down into there to find the TPS plug would be impossible, so they made it nice and easy to remove the harness if you need to. Also breaking out here is going to be your pedal position sensor. Okay, so that's that little one over there. So remember, this is drive-by-wire. There is no direct connection for the whole travel of the butterfly of the throttle. Only the last section over there where this will actually touch the butterfly valve over there. All right, if I can find the video, I'll put a link up to it in relation to the throttles and how they work. All right, so then the harness will carry on down here and break out underneath the throttle over there, and then it's going to go to the drive-by-wire plug that contains the wires for your drive-by-wire motor and the magnetic clutch that engages the drive-by-wire motor to the throttle body itself. Okay. Also coming out of there, you have your cam sensor. So you've got a cam sensor in the front here. Remember, there's 3 on a VVT-i. You've got 1 on each inlet cam and you've got 1 at the front here. Okay. Right. Carrying on down over there, you're going to see you've got some mounting holes there and there for some plastic clips, so that keeps it nicely out of the way. Once you get past that, then we're going to break out into 2 separate sections. All right. The first section, which is taped up, goes down through that little hole over there, down through there, over there. So that's your crank sensor. So that's nice and simple. Now, obviously, on the LS400 1UZ VVT-i, this oil filter is not like this. It is facing backwards. Hence the reason why we break out the oil pressure switch up at the top here, because that can go through there, down through there, and plug into the switch over there. In our case, on a 3UZ, the switch is actually down here. Okay. So that is then just coming straight through, and you can actually see it over there coming straight through there and down to there. All right. Okay, so that's that whole section over there. So what we're going to do now is we are going to move to the back here, and we're going to start working our way around there, and I'll go over to the other side and we'll carry on over there. All right, so at the back here, your first little breakout point is this section over here. Coming out here, you have got the whole gearbox harness. So there's all your 4 plugs. You've got your input speed sensor over there. You've got your selector, which goes on that side of the gearbox. Then you've got your solenoid and your output speed sensor, which go on this side of the gearbox. So the speed sensor's here, the selector's over there, solenoid's over there, speed sensor's just behind it over there, if your gearbox was over here like this. Right, also coming out of there, then we then have our lambda sensor plug. Now do remember that there is a little metal heat shield that goes between the block and the exhaust, and it actually protects the lambda sensor plug. So do remember to keep that intact. If not, your plug's not going to last very long at all, because it's going to be exposed directly to the heat of the exhaust manifold. And you have the nice little lambda sensor there, and it plugs in directly over there. But this is normally tucked away when you have that heat shield in. It sort of has a nice mounting point over there. Okay. Right. So that's that. And then the last piece is going to be your earth strap. And that's going to bolt down there. So remember, you've got an M6 hole over here. That's only used for the 3UZs. You've got an M8 hole down here. That's used for the 1UZ VVT-i. All right. You do actually have another hole over here. Okay. And that can be used either to take an earth from here to the firewall if you want. But you can also use the M6 hole over there to take an earth to the firewall as well. Completely up to you. We do advise that to do that, just to give a nice earth to the cylinder head. All right. Okay. Now, while we're here, we're going to take a look at this section over here. So obviously this actually belongs to the customer. So this is a section that goes down, plugs into this, or bolts to the starter motor, and it contains the harness that goes to the knock sensors and the starter motor itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut to a picture now, and that'll show you exactly what it looks like underneath there, okay? All right. Then coming out of there, we've got that little plug, which then plugs directly into the back of the harness over there. This plug is obviously held in place by a clip, so that's relatively nice and straightforward. Right, so now we've covered that, I'm going to go around the other side, and then we are going to start looking at what's over there. Okay, so following along the plastic over here, you're next going to have your breakout, which is another earth strap. So again, comes down here, goes to the M8 hole over there. So you should have your bolts and everything ready there. While I'm here, just a note, it's definitely worthwhile just getting a piece of emery cloth or something, give it a good clean over so you get a nice earth contact on the back of each cylinder head there, okay? These are all the earths for your entire harness, the fuse box, the ECU, everything. That's where these are coming from. So make sure these are nice and clean. And again, like I said, you can make another little earth strap from here to the firewall. Absolutely perfect. That's what THEOC to do. Okay. Right, so coming to the end of it over here, you're then going to have a breakout where these come out. So you've got injector 8 and you've got coil 8 over there. It's going to come a little bit further along, and then you're going to come to your ACIS valve over there. That plugs in over there. You're also going to come to injector 6 and coil 6 over there. Okay. Then moving further along, I'm just going to come underneath here. Come further along there, you're going to have another breakout over there, and that's going to go to the cam sensor for the right bank. It's going to go to injector 4 and coil 4 over there. Then the harness is going to move along, and you'll actually see over here there are some mounting points, so you can put some P clips on there and mount it down there on this side over here. But at the front here, it's going to break out. Okay, it's going to go to injector 2 over there. It's going to go to coil 2 over there. It's also then going to go to your coolant temp sensor, which is in there. Now what we've also done is we have made a little temp wire for you here, just loose with quite a few centimeters on there, so you can attach to whatever temp sensor you want. And then also we've got the oil control valve over there. And then lastly, coming out over here is basically the mass airflow sensor. All right, so guys, do make sure that you get the correct mass airflow sensor. If you're ever unsure, you can put your ECU part number, which in this case is, it'll actually be 8966150440. Once you get into Toyo DIY and you put that part number in, you can go to the airbox subsection and it'll give you the part number for the mass airflow sensor. But just a quick visual way you can check, the 3UZs and the Crown 1UZ VVT-Is had the little small airflow meter. The LS400 and the early GS300s, they had this bullet style airflow meter. I call it a bullet because if you look in there, it kind of looks like a bullet, okay? And also the Aristos had these ones as well, okay? All right, or this sort of style, so you can see straight away what you've got. Right, so coming down here, then the harness is going to carry on down over here. It's going to break out down the bottom over here, and it's going to go to the alternator plug. So you see that's the wires that we've added in. So we've added in the alternator plug, we've added in the oil pressure switch, and we've added in the temp wire into the harness there, so you guys have more functionality. And then obviously carries on down along there, and then that goes over to your lambda sensor over there. Okay, there is actually a little mounting bracket usually on your alternator here, so this sort of clips in there like that, and then that sort of runs along there, and you normally have a little mounting bracket like this little silver one over here that this can then just slide into like that. Okay, right, so that is the entire layout of the engine harness. So hopefully that's helpful. It'll tell you where everything goes, and remember, we've removed everything it's not necessary. So if anything doesn't plug in, it's not necessary. Most importantly is this little evap one that pops out over here. Usually you get a little vacuum solenoid valve, you can just get rid of that altogether. Okay. Also, while we're talking about the, or earlier about going under the inlet manifold, that's actually a good time to test your ACIS plug. So I'm actually going to pop around there. All right. So this little plug over here is going to a vacuum solenoid valve, which activates your ACIS system. All right. Now what you can do is, if you look at the plug over here, you'll see one pin is white, that is 12 volts. And the other one is blue with a white tracer, and that is ground. So in this case, if you're looking at this one, don't work by wire colors, just match them up on your harness over there. But effectively, this black one at the top, that's 12 volts, the white one is ground. You can supply that to there while the inlet manifold is off, and wait and listen for the click of the vacuum solenoid valve. If you don't hear that click, then replace that valve. That's the easiest time to do it, because you've got to take this whole intake off to put that whole sub harness underneath. You might as well do it then, and then you can replace it if required. Okay. Right, so that is everything for the actual layout of the harness. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move over to the plug. So I'm going to go through in detail all of these plugs that are meant to be connected inside the vehicle. Now obviously not all of them have to be connected, I'm sure you appreciate that, but we're going to go through every single one, and you actually need basically 4 wires to get it running. Okay, right, so we're going to start with our sort of stock standard plug, which is the 9-pin one over here. Now the first one is a 14 gauge red wire, or a 2mm squared red wire. This is a permanent 12 volt supply. Okay, so this is supplying the power for everything in the entire engine harness. Okay, so the reason it has to be permanent is because the ECU obviously stores codes. That's number one. Number two, if you know anything about our OBD systems, it can store long-term and short-term fuel trims. That all gets retained in the memory, and that's part of the permanent 12 volt supply. Okay, if you connect that to ignition supply, what you're going to end up with is a situation where your ECU is never going to store any codes. Okay, and also you're going to basically reset the ECU every time you turn the key off. Okay, so again, super important, permanent 12 volt, not ignition. Next up is pin number 2, which is a black with a yellow wire, and that is your start signal. Super simple. It's literally just giving it 12 volts, which you're going to see later when we start the engine. Okay, so you can get that from the back of a key barrel. You can wire in your own switch. Doesn't really matter which way you want to go. Super simple. You can get that done. All right. Number 3 is yellow with a green, and that's obviously connected to our little box here, because we're going to use it to see the temperature up on the dash. But that little yellow with the green is connected to that single wire temp sensor wire that I showed you over there on the other side. So again, that's just for you guys. If you're going to be swapping it into a certain vehicle, see if you can get hold of that vehicle's particular temperature gauge. If it communicated directly with the dash, then you can fit that in the engine. And if you have a look under the standard 2-wire sensor that's over there, you'll see there's a little bolt. In your case, I've actually fitted a 1UZ non-VVT-i temp sensor because it bolts straight in, okay? But that 1UZ non-VVT-i temp sensor for the gauge might not work for your gauge, okay? It might need calibration. So if you can calibrate your gauge, knock yourself out, you can use that, okay? Next up is going to be gray. So it's a gray 16 gauge wire, and that's going to be used for your fuel pump. All right. Now, the fuel pump is controlled via the ECU. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link at the top here. It's actually a video to show you exactly how that system works. I do encourage you to watch it, okay? Because there's certain things like this doesn't prime when you turn the key on, which catches a lot of people out because they think something's wrong because the fuel pump's not priming. That's just Toyota. That's how they do it, okay? So there's only 2 conditions where the fuel pump works. If you watch the video, you'll see exactly how that is. All right. Next up is going to be number 5, which is a yellow with a red tracer, this wire over here. Now you can see I've got it connected to my cluster over there. That's going to be your check engine light. Now we don't rely on you putting it to your dash. We do actually include an LED inside your fuse box over there. Okay, so that means that even without a cluster connected, you can still see the check engine light, you can still do diagnostic codes, and you can still start on the floor. Okay. Right, so that's number 5. Number 6 is going to be yellow. You'll see my little yellow wire over here. I've got to go into our box because this box is going to convert a 4-cylinder signal. Yes, the 1UZ and the 3UZ VVT-i give out a 4-cylinder rev counter signal, not an 8-cylinder. So this is converting a 4-cylinder to a 6-cylinder, and that means we're going to get an accurate reading on our IS200 cluster over here. All right. Next up is going to be number 7. That's going to be black with a red. Now this is your ignition wire. So this is the one you're going to connect to the ignition part of your key barrel, or this is the one you're going to connect to a switch which you're going to label as your ignition switch. Right. If you're going to use a key barrel, please bear in mind that key barrels have accessory, ignition, start. Accessory loses power the second you move from ignition to start. So if you are looking at the back of your key barrel with your test light or your multimeter, make sure that when you find the 12 volts with the ignition on, that it stays at 12 volts when you move the key to start, okay? As you can imagine, what's going to happen if you get to accessory feed, as soon as you go to start it, you're basically going to shut the ECU down, so it's never going to start, okay? Right? And I've seen it a few times, so please do check and make sure before you do that, all right? Next up, going to be number 8. That is your pink with the blue. So in our case, it's going here over to an LED for us. All right. Now that is your alternator charge light. Okay. So that's obviously to go to your cluster. Or if you want, you can fit a little LED on the dash with the charge light on. You can buy these nice ones from all these sort of car places that have little pictures on them. They've got LEDs in there. Okay. If you go that route and there's an LED, fantastic, right? The one thing I will advise you that I have seen on some older vehicles is, if you take it to your dash and your dash has an incandescent bulb and it hasn't got a built-in diode, okay, you need to add one or replace the bulb with an LED bulb, okay? I've seen instances where the cluster then back feeds into the alternator, which then can keep the system alive, okay? And it does that because the alternator has the light and an ignition feed, okay? So it's basically back feeding through the alternator and keeping the system alive. And again, I have seen that before, so I'm not making it up. Make sure you either have a diode or replace the LED, incandescent bulb with a LED. Next up is going to be yellow with a black. So you can see my yellow with the black there. That is your oil pressure switch. So again, I've got it to here because it's going to translate to MPX, and we're going to see our red oil pressure light appear in the corner there when we put the ignition on. Right, so that is the nice easy plug for you guys. That's what pretty much all of our harnesses get now, and that's all the basic connections there. You can see they're very, very basic. You literally only need 4 to actually get it started, which is your permanent 12 volts, your fuel pump, and your ignition, and then you start it with the start signal over there. Okay. Now you will notice that the wires are all very thin. Bearing in mind the fuse box is taking care of all the heavy loads. These are literally just signal wires. The only one that's important is your main power, which is the big 14 gauge one over there. Make sure that that stays nice and thick and goes directly to your battery. Right, so that's that one over there. Now, because it's an auto, we have a bunch of stuff for the automatic gearbox related to that. So that's going to be in this 15-pin plug over here. Okay, to start off with, you've got your OBD2 connector, right? Super important because obviously you can plug into Toyota TechStream. You can plug into one of those Bluetooth OBD2 devices. Just bearing in mind, some of those OBD2 Bluetooth devices don't always connect to these ECUs. I have come across that in the past, so make sure yours is compatible with that. But the rest of it now we're going to go through, and again, it's all related to gearbox, and you'll see that as we go through it. So first of all, we've got red with a blue tracer. That is your reverse. That's going to supply 12 volts when the selector switch and the gearbox theoretically is in reverse. So you can use those for your reverse lights, okay? Number 2 is going to be a yellow wire, and that's going to be your PWR or power mode. So when you looked at the original LS400, you saw next to the gear stick there was a switch that said PWR and snow, okay? That's basically in relation to that. Now that yellow wire needs to be fed a ground or an earth okay, to activate power mode. Now you do need to constantly supply that earth, okay, so you just use a switch, boom, and then it'll then supply earth to the ECU, which will then put it into power mode, okay. Then number 3 is going to be black with a yellow tracer, and that's going to be your snow mode. So again, same button where it had power and it had snow. Now then, be very careful with the snow mode. What is going to matter basically is the snow mode requires only a momentary earth. Okay, so you're just basically going to be touching it. So if you're going to use a button, you'd use like a push button or something like that. Okay, but ideally, obviously, you can't have snow mode and power mode on at the same time. So you'd actually like to have a switch somehow that would be clicking one way and then just pressing down the other way, effectively the same as what comes in the Lexus itself. All right. Next up is going to be number 4, and that's going to be a red wire, and that's going to be 2. So that's supplying 12 volts when the selector or the gearbox is in 2. Okay. Now the reason we do that for you guys is effectively, if you look at the way the gearbox selector or the gear stick selector on the car works, you'll see it goes park, reverse, neutral, drive, goes sideways to 4, then it goes down to 3, down to 2, and then it goes sideways over to L. So 4 and L are electronic signals. They're not mechanical signals. All right, the mechanical is literally only park, reverse, neutral, drive, 3 and 2, 4 and L electronic. So what we have to do for you guys is we supply you the 2 that you can then run that through a switch to supply to the yellow with the black wire in this case, which is L. Okay, now the reason we do that, and we do exactly the same for 4, so if you come down here you'll see blue and red. Pin number 7 is D, so it gives 12 volts when it's in drive, and number 8 orange is 4, so that's when you need to supply with 12 volts to put the gearbox into 4. Okay, now as you can imagine, when you go down mechanically, obviously when you get to drive, when you move sideways to 4, obviously D is still getting 12 volts because it's a mechanical selector switch. Okay, you can't stop that. So the ECU recognizes that when D and 4 have 12 volts at the same time, that it's in 4th and not in drive. And you'll see that when we go through the testing. Vice versa with 2. So when it's in 2 and you supply L with 12 volts, it moves from 2 to L. Okay, and again, you'll see that when we do the testing. Right, so the reason we give you 2 and D is that, I'll give you an example. If we just gave you L and 4 as electronic switches, right, let's say you move down to drive, let's say you've got a pickup truck or whatever, you're towing a caravan, go on holiday, you get to a hill, you go from drive and you go, right, I need to gear down because obviously it's bogging a bit, so you press your little button, now you're supplying 4 with 12 volts, all right, hill gets a little bit steeper, you forget that you've had it in 4, you just grab the gear stick and you push it down into 3. What's happened now? Now all of a sudden the ECU is going, what is going on? 3 and 4 have got 12 volts at the same time. Okay, it doesn't like that, and so we do it exactly the way Toyota did it. So effectively you're going to take the D in this case, which is blue-red, excuse the pun, and then you're going to connect that via a switch to the orange. Now then, if you're in drive and you flick that switch on, it'll go to 4th. But as soon as you move out of drive, obviously the 12 volt that was supplying the switch for number 4 now no longer has 12 volts. Okay, so when you go down to 3, then only 3 is going to be supplied to the ECU and everything is going to be happy. Vice versa, same with 2. If you're in 2nd and you press the button for L and the hill starts to flatten out, so you want to go now back into drive, obviously as soon as you go out of 2, it's going to cut that power to the switch you've allocated as L, and then your ECU is only going to have D having 12 volts. Okay, so it's important that you guys set it up that way. All right, and if you are using a standard LS400 gear shifter, you need those signals because those signals go to the gear shifter, because Toyota do it in exactly the same way. They actually supply the 12 volts from D to the selector to supply 4, and they use 12 volts from 2 to supply L, so you have the exact same situation, so they can never occur where 2 gear positions are indicated at the wrong time. Right, okay, so hopefully that's a good explanation of that. Next up, number 6 is going to be yellow with a red, and that is a kick down switch. Now then, if you guys are watching in the USA, okay, or Japanese models, kick down is only European, okay? The US doesn't have it, the Japanese doesn't have it, it's only European, okay? So just be careful of that, all right? This is a European ECU, which you'll see when we go through the live data. I've got an indication to show that kickdown switch is activated, okay? The kickdown switch needs to be given a ground via a switch. Now, if you look in the original car, it was one of those little sort of push switches. You'll see one had like a white with a black wire and one would have had another color wire. That is your kickdown switch, okay? So when you're fitting this in the car, and it's a European model, if we give it to you, we'll give you that kickdown switch, and you need to create a switch when you actually push the pedal all the way to the floor that it's going to be activated, okay? So just bear that in mind. Not USA, not Japanese Celsius, only European LS400s between 98 and 2000, okay? Right, moving on from there, because you've done D and 4 already. Number 10 is going to be white with a blue, okay? And that's in there as well. That is your brake switch. So that is going to be required to be supplied with 12 volts when you press the brakes, okay? Now, some of you may know that Toyotas use a 4-wire system. So the ECU actually knows when the brake is not pressed and when it is pressed. I use a relay to take care of that inside the fuse box here. So you are literally just connecting 12 volts, that white with the blue wire. It then activates a relay, which then either switches between the brake pressed and the brake not pressed, okay? So that's all taken care of for you guys. You don't have to worry about fitting any sort of fancy switches on the brake pedal itself. Right, moving along to number 11, that is a blue, solid blue wire, and that is going to be your cruise control. Now, as you are, this harness is retaining the auto. The same applies for the 3UZ. If you retain the auto, then you can have cruise control because it has a speed signal input and they are drive-by wire, so it's all controlled inside the ECU. Now, the easiest way to get the cruise control to work is going to be by getting a cruise control switch from a similar age, so like 98 to like 2005, possibly even 2010, a Toyota cruise control switch. You get them on IS200s, you get them on LS400s, you get them on LS430s, you get them on GS430s, you get them on SC430s. Any one of those vehicles that you find in a scrapyard, grip that, and it's really simple. It's one wire that we give you, which is the blue one, and the other side of the switch goes to ground. That's literally it. That's all you need, and you can have fully functional cruise control. Okay. All right, so that is that. And then, as I said, the last 3 wires there, that is for your onboard diagnostics connector or OBD2 connector over there. Okay, so as I said, all of this comes with the harness. You don't have to memorize everything I've gone through, but I can only put so much in writing on here. Otherwise, I end up with a 24-page document. So I like to do the video and explain it to you guys all in detail, and then you can just reference this as and when you come to fit it in. Okay. Right, so the next step of our process is going to be doing the testing. I've got the sheet over there. Obviously, we've already tested everything. So I'm going to come back in a minute, and then we're going to go and we're going to jump into the 2-part testing over there. So I'll be with you in a second. Right, so now we're going to move into the testing portion of the harness, and it's going to be broken up into 2 parts as usual. Top part here is just with the ignition on, and bottom part is with the actual engine running. Okay, so I'm going to quickly run through everything that we're going to do. We'll jump and get all the ignition done. I'm going to get the engine heated up so we can see the coolant temp on the gauge as part of the running test. But first of all, let's go through everything with you right now. So first thing we're going to be testing is the immobiliser removal. So you can see I've added the security light wire on there, and you can see the security light flashing on the cluster there. As soon as I put the ignition on, that light needs to turn off permanently. That means the immobiliser is removed, which we have done inside the ECU, so we've got no issues there at all. Next up is the check engine light. It's going to appear in the top corner of our cluster over there, and the LED in the fuse box is going to light up as well. So that's going to indicate that those 2 are working. Oil pressure light, that's going to appear at the bottom corner over here. It's just the little red oil pressure light that normally appears on you guys' dash. So that we're looking for lighting up. Then we're going to go to charge light, which is just this little LED over here. Okay, so that should light up as soon as I put the ignition on, indicating that's working. Once you've done that, we're going to move over to the OBD2 machine. Just make sure it is communicating. We're going to make sure it picks it up as an LS400, as a 1UZ-FE, and we're going to go look at some live data just to make sure that that is communicating. Once we've done that, we're going to activate the fuel pump on here, okay? And then we're going to jump in and turn it on and off because the fuel pump is controlled by the ECU. I can switch it on and off using our machine over there, all right? After that, we're going to do some testing on sort of the gearbox side over here, okay? And that's going to start with the PWR mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list of just the information we need on here, and then we're going to go through it one by one. So I'm going to activate the power mode. You're going to see it turn on and off there. I'm going to activate the kickdown switch. You're going to see it turn on and off there. I'm going to activate the brake switch, and you're going to hear the relay click, and you're obviously going to see the brake switch go from off to on and vice versa. Then we're going to look at the gear indicator wiring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the selector from park all the way down to 2, and we're going to see them all light up in the correct corresponding order as we do that. Then I'm going to do 4 and L. So again, I'm going to turn the selector to D. I'm going to collect 4 so you can see that light up. I'll turn it to 2. I'm going to connect L, and then you're going to see that light up as well. Okay. So that's all the testing with the ignition on. Then what we'll do is, again, I'm going to pop off, get it up to temperature, so we can see the coolant temp, and then we'll move on to the actual engine running. So first thing we're going to test is the park neutral switch. So I'm going to put it from park to reverse, try and start it. You're going to see nothing's going to happen. I'm going to put it back into park, and then I'm going to crank it over, and then it'll start. And when it started, that'll be testing the starter circuit. So that's kind of 2 in 1 there, if you will. Then we're going to move over to the ACIS valve, which is the back here. So we're going to make sure that valve goes down like that, okay, after she starts. Then what we're going to do, oh, actually what I'm going to do as well, I'm going to put a link up in the top here to show you exactly how this whole ACIS system works. So again, do advise you watching that so you know exactly what's going on there and why it's super important that it does work. Right, drive-by-wire. So again, all I'm going to basically do is just pull the accelerator pedal like that. So you can see this whole first movement that I'm doing here has got absolutely no connection to the butterfly valve. If I pull it right to the very end, you can hear that it's actually moving the butterfly valve there. So if I just move that a little bit and it revs up, we know that that's working. You'll also hear it buzz when I put the ignition on, so we know it's working as well then. Then we're going to jump back into the OBD2 machine and we're going to test the two VVT-i solenoids. So we're going to do bank 1 and bank 2. And you're going to hear the engine go lumpy when I do that. Then we're going to look at the tach signal to make sure we got a clear tach signal coming through there, or rev counter signal coming through there. Then I'm going to go around and I'm going to unplug each injector one by one, okay, just to make sure that they are working. Then we're going to look at the coolant temp over there to make sure we are getting a clean signal through there, and we can actually see the coolant temp on the gauge, so I know our yellow with the green wire is working as we expect it to. Sorry, it's a bit windy. Then we're going to come back and we're going to look at diagnostic codes, what you should have on there, because there are going to be 2 codes that will remain, and also how to read the codes via the fuse box as well as the OBD2 machine over there. Okay, so that's all the testing we're going to do. So let's jump into just putting the ignition on and going through that first section over there. Okay, now I do apologize in advance, this will take a while. There's a lot of things to test, especially with the gear indicators, etc. But let's get into it. So we've got our black with the red wire over there. We're just going to supply it with 12 volts. And what I'm going to try and do is move over to the immobiliser light over there. So you can see that is no longer flashing, that's permanently off. So that's fantastic. So we know that that's been disabled. Check engine light, we can see the check engine light in the corner over there. We can also see the LED light up on the fuse box, so super happy with that. Oil pressure light, as you can see, it's right in the corner over there. So again, super happy with that. Okay. Then after the oil pressure light, we've got our charge light. So again, here's a little LED, it's all lit up for us, so that is perfect. Right, now we move over to the OBD2 machine. Okay, and what I'm gonna do is quickly grab that. Right, I've already turned it on because it takes an absolute age to load. So I'm just going to hit on system select here so you can see clearly it's picked up as LS400 over there. Okay. Right, so now we know that that is working. Let's just go and look at some live data over there so we can actually see that it is communicating with the ECU. So we should see some coolant temps and some IATs, etc. there. So you see there's coolant temp and intake air temperature. There you go, 35 and 23. All right, so that's all fine. Now then, onto the fuel pump. So we're just going to go into active test. I'm going to scroll down to fuel pump. Now you see it says fuel pump relay and fuel pump. If you watch my fuel pump video, you'll know exactly why that is and what the other one is for. Okay, I'm just going to turn it on now. And as you can hear straight away, you can hear the relay clicking there, which is fantastic. Okay, what I'm going to do actually, I'm going to quickly plug in the fuel pump over here. Bear with me a second, so that you can actually hear the fuel pump running as well. So as I do that, there you go, so you can see that's the fuel pump running there perfectly. Right, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take a few seconds, I'm going to come back, and then I'm just going to get all the data we need to go from the PWR mode, kick down, brake switch, and gear indicator, because otherwise I've got to scroll down, and find the information. So bear with me a second, and I'm going to be back. Right, so we're back now, and as you can see, we've got our power mode at the top there, kick down switch, stop light switch, then we've got the park, neutral, park. That's going to tell us whether it's in park or neutral. Reverse drive, 4, 3, 2, and one more down, and we've got low. Okay. Hopefully you can see that. Okay. Right, so let's get into it. So we're doing first of all, the PWR mode. So what I'm going to do is go over here. Our PWR mode is yellow, and we need to give it a ground. So what I'm going to do is grab these wires over here quickly, and I'm going to find my yellow wire. I'm just going to give it a ground quickly. And sorry, you can see that power mode is on and off. Right, so that's perfect. So that's power mode working. Kick down switch. So I'm going to come here. It's our yellow with a red wire. So we've got yellow with a red over here. And again, kick down is the same thing. It needs a ground, so I'm going to give it a ground. And as I do, you will see that the kick down switch has gone to on. Pull it out, off, on, off. So that is absolutely perfect, right? After kickdown, we want to go to brake switch. Now this one is slightly different. We want to give it a 12 volts. So I'm just going to give that a 12 volts. And as I do, you can hear the relay clicking. And you'll notice the stoplight switch is going on, off, off. Fantastic. All right, so that's the brake switch. Now we're going to go to the gear indicator wiring. So for the first part, we want to see the park neutral park switch on because it's in park. I'm then going to turn from park to reverse, and you can see now reverse has turned on. I'm going to move down to neutral, and you'll see park neutral park switch comes on again. Move down to drive, and you'll see drive has now gone on. Move down to 3, and 3 has gone on. Obviously we skipped 4 there for a second. And then I'm going to go down to 2, and 2 has gone on. Okay. Now to do 4 and L, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move up to drive. So you can see that we are on drive. I'm going to come over here, and my 4 wire is orange and my drive is blue-red. So I'm going to find my orange wire, which is right there. I'm going to then push it into the blue with the red wire, which is that one over there. And you'll see that now drive has turned off and 4 turns, sorry, it's just touching. There you go, so you see 4 goes on, I pull it out, drive goes back on. I put 4 in, 4 goes back on and drive turns off. Fantastic. And just to do a little test, I'm gonna push this in here so 4 stays on. Now watch this, as soon as I go down from 4 to 3, there you go. See, 3 goes on, but 4 goes off because obviously I'm using D to supply 4. Now that I've done that, and actually while I'm here, I'm going to show you how sensitive this little stick is. There you go. There you go. Oh. Okay, so that's gone to on. I'm going to wiggle it a little bit. Wiggle it a little bit. There you go. See, now you didn't hear that click. I've just wiggled it a bit. And you'll see it's currently showing no gear position, okay? And I've wiggled a bit, there it goes back to 3 again, right? I just want to interject here. This is something that I see quite often, is when you guys are fitting this and you're making your own sort of arms or whatever, or however you're controlling the selector on the gearbox, it normally goes like that in relation to that. You need to make sure that it's all correct, okay? So if the gearbox picks up no gear indication whatsoever, it also freaks out. It doesn't know what is going on. So now, things that you should do. Number 1 is basically when you get this all hooked up and you're ready to rock and roll, use the wires that I give you. Okay, I give you reverse, we give you drive, and we give you 2. Okay, so what I mean by that is get in the car, get it into gear, into drive. If you have to use a test light, make sure the drive, the blue with the red, has got 12 volts. Then what I want you to do is I want you to drive off. I want you to drive off, see if that light turns off. If it turns off, see that little elongated bolt hole over there? You can undo that bolt and you can move this, okay? And what you want to do is you want to get in the car, you want to drive. Make sure D always has 12 volts. Then what you also want to do is obviously the engine will torque as you apply a lot of pressure. Boot it off the line. Boot it off the line, make sure the drive has 12 volts the whole time. When you boot it, when you're stopping, when you're pulling off, and when you're normally driving, okay? If for whatever reason it goes away, adjust this. Okay, to make sure it works. Now I would say normally do it in those 2 or 3 gears. So you do it in reverse, you can do it in drive, and you can do it in 2, and that'll give you quite a large spectrum. Okay, if you have an OBD2 machine like this and you can actually see the gear position, obviously you can do it with that as well. Okay, but obviously the way that most guys will probably end up doing is just put a test light on D and R and 2, and then just exactly like I said, jump in the car, just boot it. Because that's going to twist the engine the maximum amount, and if it stays in gear, or shows the gear position correctly the whole time, you're going to be absolutely fine. Okay, so let's get back to it. Now we've done 4, now let's move down to L, okay? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it onto 2, okay? Sorry, it's a bit windy. All right, so now that I'm in 2, I'm going to come down here. 2 is red, but L is yellow-black. So what I'm going to do is exactly the same thing. I'm going to find my yellow with a black wire, which is over here, okay? And 2 is red, so I'm going to find the red, and I'm just going to push that in there. And as I make connection there, yellow with a black, and 2, oh, wrong one. There you go. So now low is on, take it out, second goes on, push it in, low goes on. Right, let me put that all the way in there so it stays. And just to test as well, I'm just going to move it from 2 to 3. And as I do, 3 goes on, but low and second turn off. So again, exactly what we're expecting. So even if you were to use a switch and you were to leave low on and move to third, everything will be fine. The ECU will only get the correct signals, and obviously, but then if you went back down into second, it's going to go straight into low. Okay, so just remember that, guys, that's what I tend to find is the best solution is probably going to be, okay, to actually use light up switches. So if you have to use switches and the fact that you are working with 12 volts, okay, use switches that light up for 4 and L. So that basically when you go from, say, drive and you press the 4 button, let it light up, okay? And then basically when you go out of drive, obviously all power will disappear from the switch, so then it will turn off. But when you go back to drive, you'll go, oh, I'm in 4. Boom, and then you can press the button and go back into drive, okay? This is obvious if you're not using the original shifter, in which case you can take our wires directly to the shifter and wire it exactly as Toyota had it, and it would work 100%, okay? Right, so that is pretty much everything that we need to test with just the ignition on. What I'm gonna do now is obviously I'm gonna go and warm this thing up because it's only about 30 odd degrees. I need to get it above 40, 50, 60 so we can start seeing the temperature on the dash. So I'm gonna do that. Back in a second, and then we'll get on to the starting for you guys. All right, see you in a second. Right, so we're back now. You can see we've gone up to 53 degrees, and that gives me enough reading on the temperature gauge there, so you can see it's come off the needle. Right, quick recap. First thing we do, test park neutral switch. I'm going to put it into reverse now to show you that it doesn't start if it's not in park or neutral. We're going to start it, so you know the starter circuit's working. We're going to go over to the ACIS valve, make sure that that has gone down. We're going to rev the engine and test the drive-by-wire. We're going to jump into here, test the 2 VVT-i solenoids. We'll go over to the cluster, make sure our tack signal is working over there. Then we're going to pull out all the injectors one by one, make sure every single one is firing as it is. We'll come back to the coolant temp. Obviously it should have risen by then, so you can see where it was now, and you'll see it's actually going up. Then lastly, we'll go through the diagnostic codes and how to do diagnostic procedures on this particular one. All right, so I'm going to get my ear defenders on. Okay. I'm going to continue to talk. Usually you guys can hear me over this, but you can see at the moment I'm in park neutral park. So you see PNP SW park neutral park switch is on. I'm going to move it over into reverse. So you can see now reverse is on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch the starter wire to the 12 volts. And you can see absolutely nothing. No cranking at all. Okay. Now we're going to move it back into park. So you can see reverse is now off. Park neutral park switch is on, and let's go for it. 1, 2, 3. There you go. Right, so now we're going to go to the ACIS. You can see that valve has gone down, so we're super happy with that. We're going to rev the engine now quickly. That is all done. Let's go into the VVT-i solenoids. We're going to do bank 1 first. Alternator light's gone out as well, so that indicates that it's charging. Just going to disconnect the fuel pump quickly. Rightio. So I just want to turn the ignition off because obviously we're going to go through all the diagnostic codes and everything at the moment. Right, so on an OBD2 machine, obviously this one in particular, other ones may vary, but we're going to go into diagnostic trouble codes now quickly. Take a look at the codes that are in here. So in this particular case, obviously I've got no solenoid plugged in, I've got no speed sensors plugged in, I've got nothing in terms of the gearbox plugged in, but the two that will always be there is bank 1 sensor 2 and bank 2 sensor 2, right? Clearly they don't cause a check engine light because you can see the check engine light went off when we were running, so that's absolutely fine. Those codes will always just stay there. These other ones like shift solenoid valve number 1, 2, 3 and 4, obviously they'll go when the gearbox is plugged in. SLU, SLT and SLN are again all the solenoids as part of the gearbox, so all of them disappear. So in this particular case, the only codes that should be there if everything is running as it's supposed to is just those two top ones that you see there. All right, so that's the diagnostics machine. Obviously very nice because you can see loads of live data, you can see a whole bunch of stuff that you would like to see, but not everyone has got a diagnostics machine, so we do build in the ability to read diagnostics in the fuse box as well. We have that luxury with this particular model, so we put it in there for you guys. Right, so this is like the old-fashioned system where you get like flash codes basically, okay? So in the welcome packs that I give you guys, I give you 2 pages full of these codes so you know exactly what they mean. I'm going to show you now how to read them because we have 2. We've got 27 and 29, and you'll see exactly how you read them when we do this. All right, so when you look at the fuse box, you're going to see there's a section here that looks like it should have a fuse in, but it doesn't, okay? Don't put a fuse in there, all right? That's how you read the diagnostics, okay? So you can take this fuse that's right next to it, okay, and you're just going to bridge it in there, and as I do that you're going to see the check engine light's going to go off, right, and then it's going to start flashing. So it's going to go 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. That's bank 1 sensor 2. 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. That's 29, bank 2 sensor 2. Then it's going to be a long pause, and then it's going to go back again. 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. See, right, so I'll pull that out, put that back in over there. Light will come back on solid again. So what it's going to do is it's just going to keep on rolling. So it's just going to go 2 7 2 9, long pause, 2 7 2 9, long pause, and it'll keep on doing that until the end of time. Okay, so these codes get stored by the ECU, which is why I will reiterate again that red wire that I tell you to connect to a permanent 12-volt source. Please do that. Okay, when you're doing diagnostics, the ECU will always store the code. So even if there was an error for a few minutes and your check engine light came on and literally 5 minutes later went back off again, it doesn't matter, it's going to store the codes. It gives you the ability to read the codes, see what sensor was causing the issue, and maybe it's a sign that that sensor is about to fail. Okay, so again, if you connect that to ignition 12 volts and you turn the key off, you're going to wipe the ECU and you're not going to get any codes out of it because you're going to start afresh again. Okay, so that's how you read the codes on there. Obviously the OBD2 machine is really straightforward. You plug it in to the plug we've provided, it'll pick it up as an LS400, and you can go do all the live data, all the tests or whatever, depending on your machine. Obviously guys, some of them are just simple Bluetooth OBD readers and they can only view live data. It's absolutely fine, but just bear in mind that it might not have the functions that I do, like you can test all the control valves and all of that type of stuff. Okay, there is one other thing I want to highlight when you do bridge those 2 terminals, okay, because it is quite important. When you bridge those 2 terminals, you put the ECU into what they call a diagnostic mode. Part of that is flashing the codes via the check engine light. Not the only part though. What it also does is it locks the timing at 10 degrees, okay? So you can see down here, you've got your timing marks 0, 5, 10, and 15 degrees. And what I normally do on my crank pulley, and you can actually see, you might be able to see it just inside there, just where my finger is there. I've got a bit of Tipex or some white paint and I've marked the marker there. So what you can do is if you're under a suspicion that your timing is out, maybe the cam has slipped just one tooth, or when it was done, a cam belt change was done, you weren't 100% sure that you weren't a couple of, 1 or 2 degrees out, get a timing light, whack it on here, bridge those terminals with that fuse like that. Just bearing in mind this fuse next to it is actually your starter fuse. So if you do remove that, if you want to start the engine by bridging it, I just get a paper clip or something and just ram it in there, okay? Start the engine up, timing light on there if it works on just wires to an ignition coil. Check your timing, make sure it's at 10 degrees. Okay, if it's not, then you can pull the covers off and check all the physical timing marks and make sure they are correct. All right, Okay, so hopefully that's been super useful for you guys when you are installing these. Hopefully you help with a bit of information over there. But we need to get this off back to the customer, because this is actually a job that was already converted. They've sent us the harness to have it redone because they were having many issues with it. But yeah, we'll get this off to the customer so that he can get rock and rolling. If you guys have any questions, again, feel free to ask us on the comments below. I try and get them as much as I can. You can also message us. And again, I try and get to you as much as I can. Obviously, I'm only one person, so please do bear that in mind. And like I said in the past, if I don't get back to you within a day or two, please message me again. I won't get offended. It's just me dealing with everything. And obviously, things do get lost and forgotten about. So again, I do apologize about that. Right, so let's get off of here. We've got about 3 different Link ECU harnesses to test next, so we want to get on and get those done. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win it life, I never miss, that's fact, taking big swings, put your hand to the bat, put me in the ring, you'll go out in a bag, cause I sing what I mean and I bring it to the mad light, ain't got time to kill, I got time to feel, I took the red pill, I know life's short so I wanna live real, but I'm exposed